Artson, Wolpe, yes. Alphabetical, always alphabetical. He got Artson, I got Wolpe. You can imagine
Made all the difference.
what that did to our psyche as we were growing up. So we have a half an hour for this discussion before we move into the Mincha service. And this year, I confess that almost every year Rabbi Artson came up with the topic, but this year I did, although it was very easy, which is, let's talk about things we are hopeful about for the coming year, since every other discussion is things that we are discouraged about. So you want to start with something that gives you hope for the coming year? You can begin with the election.
So, well, I wasn't going to start with this, but I do have to observe, and I hope you'll corroborate this. You know, I was at Harvard for 4 years.
And nothing bad
And the place was fine. What did you do? But now that he's safely back in California, I'm hoping that the market value of my diploma will go back up again. Hope. So this year for me has been complicated because people say, how are you? And I have two totally different answers depending on what part of my life we're talking about. So for like you, my main hope comes from the people I love. You know, if my kids are doing great, if my wife is doing great, then I'm good. And my kids are amazing. They're doing great. So Jacob will be with us for Ne'ilah, as he always is. We do our hour-long Ne'ilah hug. And that gives me hope. My kids give me hope.
So I had thought about putting this in the High Holiday Sermon, and then I forgot. But I mentioned it to my niece, and she put it in her High Holiday Sermon. So at least one Wolpe gave this as a High Holiday Sermon. But when I was in Israel, I heard Edgar Keret, the wonderful Israeli writer, by the way, the most widely read Israeli writer in the world. And he writes very short and poignant and sometimes sweet, but sometimes stinging short stories. And he was being interviewed. And he said, look, I talk to everyone. And sometimes, he said, I'll be talking to cab drivers and they'll get annoyed with me because I keep asking them questions. And I will say to them, okay, I want to ask you 2 questions. And I want you to give me an honest answer. And they'll say, okay. He'll say, tell me what it is in your life that gives you the most joy. And they'll say, my kids, my dog, my spouse, my neighborhood, whatever. And he'll say, and now my other question is, what makes you angry? And they'll go, Bibi, Biden, Trump, And he'll say, notice that everything that gives you joy is in person, and everything that makes you angry is on a screen. So spend more time in person and less time on screen, and you will be happier.
Okay, how about you? Source of joy.
Source of joy. Well, yes, certainly my daughter. And I would say, also, like, for me, and I know that this doesn't necessarily, I don't know that this would be the answer for everyone, but the fact that there is so much of interest in this world, and I'm not talking about empty stuff, I mean of real interest to read, to watch, to listen to, like podcasts, good things to watch, and especially good books, they give me untold amounts of joy. And one of the things I know is, like, there's a balance, because it can be frustrating. You could say, oh my God, there's so many things I want to watch. And that can be a source of frustration. But on the other hand, what that means is there will always be something good and worthwhile. If not to watch, then to listen to or to read. And we are in an age where there is tremendous blessing of variety of stuff. Yeah. So I would say that.
Great. I have another thing to add to the list. So, you know that in this on the side, when I'm not here at Sinai, I'm trying to run a rabbinical school, and my students fill me with joy. I watch them doing amazing things. They think of things I would never have thought of. They bring such vitality and energy, and to watch them love Judaism and Jewish tradition and then go, I mean, one of the burdens of being a rabbi who runs rabbinical school is everyone I've graduated thinks I should read their high holiday sermons. So I have a stack of sermons to get, but they're great. Like they're amazing. Ruth, if you're listening, you did something wonderful. So from the students, joy.
That actually is both a joy and a burden. I now have a lot of friends who write books. And you realize if you want to say to somebody, oh, could I talk to you for a second? It's one thing. When you say to someone, would you read my book? What you're saying is, would you give 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours to me? And when you already have a stack, it becomes a lot. That's true. But that's, you know, it's a lot of the things that are frustrations in our lives are the excess of blessing. And the excess of blessing is a good thing.
So one of them that I think you and I probably also share, you know, some of you may be aware that this was a difficult year in the Middle East. And I think part of what we have to remember is that part of what makes it so excruciating is Israel has filled our lives with so much blessing. On big and little, you know, the Israeli fiction and TV shows and movies and culture and intellectuals, but also Israeli food and Israeli manners and walking in Tel Aviv or hiking in the Judean, like our lives are so much better because of Israel, and that has been a source of resilience and of joy.
And also, since you said your students, I have to say, like in fairness, I met many, many wonderful people at Harvard. And it has a tremendous Jewish community. It has a great Hillel, it has a great Chabad, and they stood up and fought for the students this past year, and it was great to see. And in fact, one of my favorite people, I won't say my favorite because that's, you know, not nice to everybody else. The people that I met at Harvard is somebody who's going to be our scholar in residence this year, and her name is Rosalie Abella. She was the first female justice of the Canadian Supreme Court. She wrote the rule that gave Indigenous people in Canada their rights, and she is a charming and wonderful and interesting person. And so even in, you know, places where there were difficulties, there are always, always people who are really quite wonderful and interesting people.
I got another joy. So one of the reasons I haven't murdered anybody yet is because I exercise every day. I have a rowing machine in my garage. I have an elliptical machine. I have free weights. You probably noticed. And the regimen of working out is my time. Like that, I don't engage the world when I'm doing that, and that is, my body gets recalibrated.
I haven't noticed, actually, when I've looked, for example, in prison movies and so on, that murderers are particularly slovenly or have a...
They got in shape afterwards.
Afterwards, got it. Well, that's actually, okay, so that is something that gives me joy that is similar, although not as rigorous, which is that every morning, I wake very early. I get up sometime between 5 and 6 virtually every day, and I go out for between an hour and 2 hours and take a walk, and I listen to a podcast or a book on tape, and it is a really wonderful thing to do to start the day, and I strongly recommend it. And also, I mean, I know that some people like to walk with people and talk. That's way too much. Like I can't do both. I can listen to a book and walk, but to actually produce my own sounds is too much. But really, walking is, and we live in a place where you can do that almost 365 days a year. In Boston, some mornings it was really cold, and when it wasn't, it was also raining. So that is a great blessing, and I think that it's also, if you are even mildly OCD, the fact that you can tell how many steps you took is a real motivator.
Is there something that you've learned this year to avoid or minimize as a way of protecting your joy?
Yes, I'm really careful, and I mean this, about what I watch about politics. I don't know if you know this, but there was a study done. Arthur Brooks talks about it. He writes, he's from Harvard, talks in the Atlantic, really terrific guy, that it's almost an exact correlation that the more politics you watch, when you ask people how closely do you follow politics, if they say very closely, they are likely to score lower on how happy are you. And it goes back to the Edgar Carrot screen thing. So I am careful, and one of the ways that you can change this is by changing your attention span. One of the reasons we do this is because you get constant stimulation by this, but actually being able to do things for a longer time, like read a book, will really reorient and rewire your brain in a way that I think will make you happier, because the political stuff, no matter who wins or what happens, it's going to make people, less likely to be serene.
And I'll add to that, one of the things I did this year, which was admittedly born out of desperation, I don't check my phone or my email before 10 in the morning or after 9 at night. So there's a hard stop, and so I used to wake up, reach for my phone, get some horrific emails, and then there goes the day. But now I daven, I do a workout, I study a bit, and then I go. So putting it within time limits, but that has to do with joy also comes from mindful choices, right? And being able to not be buffeted by what life throws at you, and instead making conscious decisions about how to allocate your energy, your attention, your time, and that's one of them for me.
So I will say two quick things also. First of all, because I see David sitting there, one of the things, David helped me find my apartment in Culver City, and since I live on a high floor, one of the things that gives me great joy is looking out at the view of Los Angeles. It's really just having a view is a really nice thing. So that's one joy. And then the other thing I was going to say is, I don't know how many of you know this. This is exactly what Rabbi Artson just said in a parable about the professor who brings a glass, and he says, he puts 3 big rocks in it. And he says, oh, is the glass full? And everybody says yes. And he goes, no, it's not. And then he pours gravel over the rocks. And he says, now is it full? And he says, no, it's not. And then he pours water into the glass. And he says, now it's full. He said, but if I had poured the water first, I never would have had time for the big rocks. If you spend all your time answering email and checking your phone, you won't have time to read a book. You won't. But if you read a book, you will miraculously still have time to answer all your emails. It's amazing how it works. So think in your life, what are your big rocks, so to speak? What is it that you really wish you would do but you don't have time to do? But you really want to do it and it takes time, like working out is an example. And if you do it, you will be astonished to discover that all your emails still get answered. I don't have my phone today, right? It's somewhere else. But I know however many emails I find when I finally turn my phone on, they will somehow magically all get answered.
I'll add another thing. You may not know that we went to rabbinical school together. He was both older and smarter. He's still older. And smarter too. But I get...
And much less organized.
Smarter.
He had one of those notebooks that had everything in a file and so on, and I would I really got to remember that, and a week later I would have no idea what the professor had said. Anyway, please, carry on.
I get great joy from old friends.
Yes.
and these friends that you don't have to prove yourself to, you don't have to earn anymore, but it's just, we're going to be in each other's lives forever, and
have
there's a
been for-
reliability,
Yep.
and I know you really well, and you
Yep.
can tease me and I can tease you, because it comes from a place of deep, deep respect and love. And then added to that is the joy, and I'm going to say this in front of you. We all expected great things from David Wolpe, even in rabbinical school.
Here comes the Schadenfreude.
And-
And it didn't
and-
happen,
and
and
he
it
has-
gives you great joy to
and-
see.
And he has exceeded those expectations. And watching your friends shine in the world is itself a source of powerful joy.
So what I would say about that, I mean, because obviously he has shined just as we knew he would. He's the dean of the Rabbinical School of Ziegler, and probably the most prominent voice of conservative Judaism in our country. But that's only true if you're the kind of person who gets joy out of other people's accomplishments. And that's actually really central, which is, if you can take joy out of other people doing well, your life will be much better than if every time someone does well, it's like what Gore Vidal said, every time one of my friends succeeds, I die a little bit, right? Some people are that way. But if you can actually take joy out of the success of others, then not only is it good, and will it be better for you, but it also gives you a different way of being in the world. We have a mutual friend who I think is like a prodigy of this, Joseph Telushkin. Like the first time I met Joseph Telushkin, I was amazed at what joy he took in the successes of others, and I tried to learn from that. And that gives you a sort of constant source of joy.
I got another. So I also think one of the challenges, opportunities in life is to savor your own life without trying to live other people's.
Yes.
Right? So the key to being able to enjoy Rabbi Wolpe's amazing achievements is I'm not living that life. So instead of trying to also live my life and his life, is to say he's got that life covered. And here's the life that I've been given, and can I enjoy that? And I think that's actually harder to do than it first sounds, but to be able to enjoy your own lane and not look with envy at every other lane becomes essential for a life of just quiet contentment. And you can't have joy without that.
I'm going to move back to the mundane, although many of you will disagree with me about this. In fact, I think maybe even a majority. Going to bed early is a great joy, and you should try it. It's amazing. Like you could, if you want to, you can go to bed and watch a movie. As long as you're in bed early and you have the possibility of actually falling asleep, it is remarkable what a joy that can be, because I will tell you a secret. You're not missing out on anything, right? It's like, oh my God, I could be at this club or this place, forgetting that the last 17 times you went, you actually didn't enjoy yourself.
Rabbi Wolpe,
you just felt compelled to go.
I need some counseling here. Your advice is really brilliant and good advice, so I just need your help tweaking it a little. What do you do if I believe in going to bed early. My biology forces me to. I get in bed at 10, and I'm married to a federal prosecutor who I adore. I adore her. I want that to be clear for what I'm about to say. But she gets in bed an hour later, and she can't go to sleep without reading, and she won't read on an iPad. She reads paper that crinkles and makes noise or whatever. It has to have a light on it. How do you go to bed early when the person, what I think you're suggesting is I get a separate room?
Yeah.
That's, by the way, why Queen Elizabeth lived to be as old as she was.
Right.
She had her own bed, her own room. It was like, good night, honey.
Also, I know that this sounds like something we are supposed to say, but it's also true. I don't know that this gives you joy exactly. I'm not sure that that's the right word. But having some kind of serious spiritual life makes your life better. It really does. praying every day, even if it's for a brief time, coming to synagogue, having a community, knowing that there are people even outside your family that you can count on and who are a part of your life and have the same life direction that you do, that also makes a huge difference. And there are, by the way, again, endless studies about how a religious life makes people happier than people who don't have any kind of religious life.
So I will say, you know this, but this was a very personally difficult year for me professionally. I went through a very difficult time. The university's fine, my school is fine, and we won, but it was a difficult year. And the book of Psalms helped me through that, because it's this unbelievably honest spiritual book. It's not American sugar-coated spirit, like, you know, the psalmist wants to smash people against the rocks from time to time, as do we all. And but it was a path to holding on, and that others who have been through really dark days, gone through the valley of the shadow, they found themselves in fields of still water eventually. And so I was reading Psalms every morning when I davened, and that book, I cannot recommend strongly enough. The book of Tehillim got me through.
Yeah, the way that I would think of it is that you always have company on your journey. They might not be people who happen to be alive and standing next to you. Right? But what the Greeks used to say about Plato is any road of life you walk down, you found him on the way back. In other words, he'd already experienced it and could tell you about it. And that's what the Jewish tradition is. It's like you're not, whatever you're going through, believe me. So, in fact, I was watching this, I'm going to misquote it. I wish I could quote it directly. So I got Chai-Flix. I don't know how many of you have Chai-Flix. But yeah, I will tell you what it is. Chai-Flix is an app that shows all Israeli content, shows, right? Yeah. Most of them in Hebrew, but all of them subtitled.
Netflix for Israelis.
Thank you, that's what it is. Netflix for Israelis. And there's a show called Fire Dance. And the rabbi says something like, to one of the people that he's counseling, he goes, in their own mind, everyone's a criminal, everyone's a pervert, everyone's a jerk. The one thing that they don't know is that that's true for everyone else's mind too. And to know, if you actually look at the tradition and read it in breadth, then you realize there's nothing that I mean, look at the sins. Why do you think all those sins are there? Because no one was doing them? No, they're there because generation after generation after generation, in fact, someone was doing them. In fact, should I get really personal here? So I saw something in Shul today, and I gave Rabbi Guzik a look. Like, look at that. And then we were reading the sins in the English, and it said, for the sin which I have committed by conspiratorial glances. And I went, oh my God, I just did that. I just did that. And she said something like, well, why do you think it's in there? So it was like astonishing. It was really so on target. But the same is true for all the kinds of sins that we commit. That is not to say that we shouldn't try to be better, but it is to say that we're not alone in here. Like, our tradition and our community, we all are going through much of the same thing. It's just that we don't always tell each other.
One of the great benefits of being a Jew, of being a human, you know, we, unlike other mammals, can share experiences with individuals we've never personally met. That's what literature does, that's what art does, that's what storytelling and myth does. We expand the circles of our fantasy and our individual personality to incorporate times and places that we didn't personally experience. And Jewish tradition is that on steroids, right? This incredibly wise collection of people who have been through all the same challenges we have, and our tradition is one of the rare ones that doesn't clean them up. Like, you get to see them struggling with what we're struggling with. And I find that's a constant companionship, that I have a chevra, a community of people who aren't alive and not alive here, and they're with me. So that also is a source of joy.
Yeah, and also we're about to, this sort of goes back to something that Rabbi Artson mentioned before, but we're about to build a sukkah, which is called Zman Simchatenu, the time of our joy. And there are lots of interpretations about why it's the time of our joy. And one that I thought of a few years ago that I haven't seen in any of the sources, although it's got to be somewhere, is that it's the only time that we actually build something. Right? Jews are not known for their skills in building, by and large, except cities they build, but like, hammer and nails, not so much. But actually doing something physical with your hands, creating something, shaping something, can also be a great source of joy. And I say this as somebody, so, I am IKEA's nightmare, okay? I mean, they send the simplest things and I get unbelievably frustrated. But when I was in Boston, I thought to myself, I'm gonna order something from IKEA and I don't care how many hours it takes me. I am going to figure it out. And I misbuilt it 3 times, because that's me. I had to take it apart again, because partly because I don't pay attention very well. I'm like, oh yeah, I got those, and they turned out to be the thises and not the that's, or whatever it was. But I finally got it built, and I have to tell you, it gave me an enormous sense of joy. So sometimes actually, and if you're used to building something, then doing that which is different. So learning some kind of new skill, an instrument, a language, building something, doing something that you don't normally do and succeeding in it and allowing yourself to not be exceptional, just to do it, can be a fantastic thing to do.
Can I close with a joy story?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this builds on what you said with Sukkot coming. Did I mention I went to Harvard?
No, actually. What was it like when you were there? Because
you wouldn't know.
I didn't go to Harvard. I taught there. But please go ahead.
So you'll pay for that. So I did not grow up observant, and I got turned on to Judaism when I was a student, and I read in a book that Jews are supposed to sleep in the sukkah. And the book didn't mention that that's true if you live in a Mediterranean climate. But so I prepared to sleep in a sukkah, because that's what the book said. So I got out in the Harvard Hillel sukkah, and I didn't stop to notice that there wasn't another sleeping bag, like no one else, including all the Orthodox Jews. Nobody was planning to sleep in the sukkah, but God wanted me to do this, so I did. I put out those, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a sheet of ice over my sleeping bag, which is a sign. So I went inside to get some like hot cider or something, and I don't believe in the God who does this, but God did this. Somebody stole my sleeping bag, and the reason,
I'm waiting for the joy here.
The reason they did was because Artson would have been dumb enough to get back in the sleeping bag. He'd have froze to death. Okay, but here's the joy. When we moved to Southern California, which is a Mediterranean climate, the first thing we did, Alana and I, for our anniversary, we got ourselves a sukkah. And when the kids were young, I would sleep with them in the sukkah. And you do not know joy unless you wake up in the middle of the night with your kid or your grandkid breathing quietly next to you, and the stars through the schach. That is, you get why it feels like being embraced and protected. That is when it all comes together. That is the greatest joy.
Mincha.